chairs up here. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. And I thought I would start, John, with your norm of no devices before the age of 14. And I was hoping we could unpack that one just a little bit. And in the following way, which is one argument that some people make is it's really the problem is social media, not the devices themselves, right? And you've given a number of arguments why that may not be true. But can you unpack for us, what does it actually mean? Is it that a kid should never look at a screen before the age of 14? Should they not have control over it? Can we as parents just prevent any social media on their devices? Unpack that for us.
So a really important thing to put up front here is that stories are good. Humans are a storytelling species. We convey culture in stories. We love stories. We've told stories for hundreds of thousands of years. So if you want to watch a movie with your kid, that's great. Let them pay attention to a story for 90 minutes. If they want to watch some cartoons now and then, not in the first 3 or 4 years, but 5, 6, 7, if you want to give them an hour of cartoons on a Sunday morning, ideally longer things are better, because these are still stories. Okay, here's what's not a story. Also I should say, movies and television can't reinforce you. You sit and you watch. But a smartphone or an iPad is B.F. Skinner in a little box. B.F. Skinner, the founder of behaviorism, he discovered that if you give animals a variable ratio reward schedule, you can hook them, you can train a rat to do almost anything if you give them this right schedule of rewards. With a smartphone, the kid is interacting with it, they touch, they get feedback. Not always, it's not always good, but on a variable ratio it is. So this is the best training machine for a human that you can imagine. And you know who gets to administer the training? Not you. A million weirdos on the internet. They get to train your child. So I'm saying don't be afraid of screens per se, but remember that if a third of the day of your child is spent doing things that give them quick dopamine, then the other 2/3 of the day will be painfully boring. Everything else will be boring. So you have to watch especially the interactive touchscreens and video games.
So it sounds like time on device as well as what they're watching on device. If they watch the movie on an iPad instead of a television, and you keep it to just a movie, it sounds like that might be an okay.
Well, that's right. If you could disable the iPad so that all it did was show movies, but if a device can do 50 things, your child is not going to focus on one thing. They're going to divide their attention and do 50 things.
Well, your book has had an enormous impact on conversations. Already in Australia, we see that they have nearly entirely phone-free zones, but it's had a huge impact on Governor Sanders as well, who, as I understand it, after seeing the book, gave a copy of it to all of the legislatures in the state of Arkansas, as well as to governors across the country. Can you tell us a little bit about what was it about the message that resonated so strongly with you, and what is the action that it's motivated for you?
So I had the chance to read through the book, and for me, frankly, the part that had the biggest impact is the fact that I'm a parent. Even far greater than being governor, I have a 7th grader, a 5th grader, and a 3rd grader. And so I'm living the challenges in real time. The biggest fight we have at our house is over phones every single day. And a lot of the parents and my peers are having these same conversations. And so that was the initial draw. But certainly we were seeing the impact of it in our schools, the mental health crisis that has plagued every community, not just across the country, but frankly across the globe. And so the story that Dr. Haidt was willing to tell was so captivating. But he didn't just say, hey, we have a problem. There was so much research, so much data, but then he gave us a path forward. And to me, that was the biggest piece of why it was so important to share that story with so many other people. And so I took copies of the book, sent it to every member of the legislature in Arkansas, as well as every governor in the country, so that we can hopefully take collective action, because I think it is one of the biggest challenges that we are facing. And we've taken action in our state just in the course of the last couple of months. We opened up a pilot program where we instituted the ability for schools to go phone-free voluntarily. And within the first couple of weeks of opening that up, we saw 75% of the school districts in our state voluntarily choose to participate in that program. And one of the things that Dr. Height pointed out when we started this program was don't just open it up, make sure you're tracking the progress. And so that was something that was really important to us. And we've been able to do that and show proof of concept within just the first year of some of the schools in our state going phone free. We've seen a 51% drop in drug-related offenses. We've seen a 57% drop in verbal and physical aggression among our students, and a massive increase in overall participation of students in the classroom. So we're already seeing a real-world impact. I can see it at my own house, but certainly in classrooms across the state as well.
Yeah. Can I just add, because I was lucky enough to spend 2 days in Arkansas, and we had kind of a road show. We gave a couple of talks. We visited a few schools in Arkansas. And what was so thrilling was, first of all, the kids endorsed it. The kids loved it because actually it's really fun to talk with other kids. And the thing that really just warms my heart is wherever we went, the teachers, the administrators, they always say the same thing, which is we hear laughter in the hallways again. Yeah. And we haven't heard that in 10 years.
You know, a little funny anecdote on that, John. I took my 10-year-olds to the pediatrician last week, and one of the screening questions that a lot of them ask now of parents or of the child, right? She said, does your mom give you as much screen time as you'd like? And she said, oh, yes, she does. The doctor looked horrified, and I was like, no, like explain. And she said, no, she gives me as much as I want because I don't want screen time, because she's explained to me the effect on the kids when they understand the impact, especially within the school environment, they react positively to it. But that was a funny moment of it. Now, one of the things I thought was extraordinary about you leading the charge on this is a lot of people think that this is, a partisan issue, right? That you wouldn't see anyone who is Republican taking on the helm of doing this. I thought the fact that you did it as a voluntary program both spoke to the fact that you had massive uptake without having to take a heavy-handed regulatory approach, and really showed a kind of leadership of this is a bipartisan issue. This is a issue that anyone can take on and not face the kind of political blowback that they might face. Could you speak a little bit to the political environment around this?
Sure. This is certainly, there's nothing partisan about it. It's impacting literally every single family, every single community, every state in the country. And so it's really important that we work together to address the issue. I think one of the points that Dr. Height makes so incredible throughout his book is that it is going to take collective action. And it's not going to have a huge impact if only one state does something. And so really coming together, working on it together is going to be how we have a huge cultural shift, because that's what it's going to require. And so having that level of partnership, I think, is so incredibly important. We've been able to take that action and open it up voluntarily. Now we do want to go in and take it a step further and legislate, which we plan to do this session, which we started this past week, where Arkansas will go bell to bell, phone free in our schools. And I think it will have a tremendous impact. But it was really important to start with a more soft approach and have that voluntary opt-in, show proof of concept, and now we can move into a much more, I think, aggressive plan moving forward.
Can we talk about the second piece of that? And I want to come back to this collective action question in just a moment with you, Dr. Height. But the second piece, right, was this age of 16 for social media. Can you speak a little bit to that aspect of what you did and how successful that's been and how that's being implemented and received?
I'd like it to be a lot more successful than it has been. We passed legislation in Arkansas that would require parental permission for any new social media account for anyone under the age of 18. Unfortunately, we ended up in court very quickly, as you might imagine, and we're still going through that process, but we plan to introduce new legislation over the course of the next couple of months, hopefully moving that along a little bit better. But I think it is one of the other places that we can take action, and one of the ways to engage parents, because I think that's one of the biggest pieces of this.
Well, that's a nice segue to talk with Dr. Height about this, right? You've talked about the collective action trap that parents are in. I'm lucky, my kids are still young, right? I have a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old. I'm not facing the social pressure yet for them to be on social media. But this is one of the traps that parents are in, is they feel like their child will be left out, that they can't. And so define for us what this collective action trap is and how we get out of it.
Sure. So a collective action trap is any situation in which if one person does the right thing, they're going to be penalized and nobody else is joining in. But if half of the people do the right thing, suddenly it's actually a lot easier to act. And so if you're the only parent who doesn't give your kid a phone, well, then you're a bad mom and your kid feels left out and made fun of. But if it's 10%, if your friend, if you work with the parents of your kids' friends, so that 5 of them you're all on the same page, and you don't just take away the phones, you actually encourage them to go out and play together, or you give them a fun, exciting childhood with little or no supervision. It's very important that kids have some unsupervised time. Now suddenly they're the cool kids. They're the kids who are actually doing fun things. And then if it spreads and becomes a majority, well, then we've won. So it's very important that we act together on this. And I think having the fact that Australia now has raised the age to 16 and said to the companies, you guys enforce it, you figure out, you can do anything, you're going to be able to get this. Indonesia just announced they're going to also go the same way. So if we get a bunch of countries saying 16, it's just not appropriate for for teenagers and young kids to be on these platforms, and if a bunch of states do it, the companies are going to have to do it. And then we'll have a global norm, and it'll just cut off so much of the rotting of attention and the negative emotions and the social comparison and the lack of exercise and lack of sleep. Let's just delay that till 16. At that point, we can, no, not really, but yeah, delay till 16.
Let me press you on this one a little bit. I know that we all remember COVID and the lockdown period. And as a parent of young children, many of us were facing a childcare crisis during that time, right? So parents were having to work from home. And what we saw was, I think, increased use of smart devices is in many ways a babysitting device, right? In order for parents to be able to work. And so it became an equity issue too, right? To the extent that you could actually afford to have a nanny or childcare, you might not have had your child on a device as much. So how much of this kind of reverse equity issue is a problem for the call for it? And, I think when sending children out to play outside sounds great, but, you need a safe neighborhood, you need a place in which they can do so. So can you speak a little bit to how we navigate that?
Yeah, certainly. So first, all these problems were deep in 2019. So COVID made things worse, but basically kids have just returned to the trend line. And what we're seeing in the education outcomes is the wealthiest kids are actually not declining, but the kids in the bottom, whether you measure by economics or by test scores, it's the kids in the bottom that are dropping. So whatever it is we're doing, we are greatly amplifying class differences in the United States, and I believe it's because of the technological difference. What we know from data and surveys is that if you have 2 married parents with college degrees, educated, then let's say in some surveys, let's say it's 6 hours a day on your phone. But when you take those things away, and especially when you look at, as you say, if you're a single parent and especially low SES, those kids are on much more like 10, 12 hours a day. And so there is a huge equity issue. And that's why phone-free schools is so important, because a phone-free school is going to give a lot more benefits to the kids in the lower fifth, to the kids who have single parents, the kids who they're spending the rest of their day online. Give them 6 hours a day of looking at people.
I think that makes good sense, but you must be struggling with this issue as you think about policies going forward, which is how to think about how this addresses the home environment. So you mentioned the challenge legislation on not before 16. Are you looking more directly at the mechanisms, the kind of addictive features and other kinds of data collection practices by social media companies to try to regulate the social media companies more directly rather than simply the age of opt-in?
Certainly, I think, we don't want to over-regulate within the home. Parents need to have the ability to parent their kids. But I do think our role in schools is where we have a place to play. And I think that's why it's so important for us to use the tools we have. One of the big things that Dr. Hyde has pushed for on a much broader level, and something we've been supportive of, is the COSA legislation that would help, I think, protect beyond the schools, but it's the type of content. One of the specific specific instances that is very personal that we've seen in the state of Arkansas, and I talked about it extensively in my State of the State address just this past week, is a family, Jenny DeSario. She had a 16-year-old son, Mason, by every account, by every measurement, a happy, very productive, popular kid, no issues, goes through a bad breakup. Within 2 weeks after that, he's inundated with messages on TikTok of how to take his own life. 2 weeks. His parents take his phone away one night thinking we'll give him a break from his phone. Within 13 minutes of taking his phone away, the dad goes upstairs, bangs on the door, and it's too late. Mason took his own life, 16-year-old kid. Within 2 weeks, he went from being a relatively happy, healthy kid to being absolutely inundated with step-by-step process on how to take his own life. Those are the types of things that I think that we need to look at. How do we do a better job protecting, and that type of legislation on a federal level is a place that we can have a real impact, save kids' lives, protect the mental health of our young population, but it will take a lot of people coming together. It's why I'm proud of working on this project, leading in our state, but we'll continue fighting at the federal level as well.
So it's terrific that you mentioned COSA and also that you sent to all of the other state governors. Seeing what's happened in Australia, I imagine that you are getting calls from around the world of different countries who are interested in trying to experiment with the models that you put into place. So wondering if you can speak at all to some of the international efforts. And Dr. Haidt, absolutely, I know that your book is an international bestseller. It has resonated worldwide. And so if you can both speak a bit to that, like how are these efforts really becoming not just state by state, not just a federal and state, but also a global issue that can be reversed and turned around?
Sure. Okay, I'll start. One thing that's been remarkable to me as I've been on book tour originally and then meeting more with politicians later is that almost every conversation I have, and this is true with journalists, but it almost always starts with, I have a 6 and an 8-year-old at home, and or I have a 14-year-old, and everything you said in the book I see in my child. So, as Governor Sanders said, this is happening to everybody, all over the world. Family life has become a fight over screen time. We didn't ask for this, but it's been put on us. And so I think that's why it's totally bipartisan, and that's why it's spreading around the world, because legislators everywhere around the world most of them are parents. And so they see it. This is not like where I had to go persuade people and change their minds. Everybody saw it, everybody felt it. But what we needed was what we call in the social sciences for it to become common knowledge. If everyone knows something but they don't know that everybody else knows it, and everybody knows that everybody knows, suddenly you can all act. And that's what's happening around the world.
Well, so you have some really exciting initiatives underway that I think are designed to empower all of us, because we need, as you said, for at least two of the norms, we need leadership from Governor Sanders, from other governors, from other leaders around the world. But parents can take actions at home and have to take actions at home as well, right? So could you speak a little bit to the initiatives that you've launched as well, and how we get back to this through some of those efforts?
Sure. So in 2017, I co-founded an organization called Let Grow. If you go to letgrow.org, with a woman who wrote a book called Free Range Kids, about letting our kids out. And so we've been working on that since 2017, the importance, and this is not such an issue in Northern Europe and some other places, but at least in the Anglo countries, we all freaked out in the 90s. We stopped trusting our neighbors. We said, no, you can't go out, you can't walk 3 blocks to a store because you'll be kidnapped. It was never true, but we freaked out about it. So Let Grow, if you go to letgrow.org, especially if your kids are under about 12, we have a lot of things you can do to give them more independence. Then more recently, for the anxious generation, once we saw the response, we've turned it into a website and a movement. So if you go to anxiousgeneration.com, take action. And we have, here's what you can do as a parent. Here's what you can do as an educator. Here's what you can do as a legislator. So anxiousgeneration.com, we're trying to coordinate and just facilitate collective action all around the world. You can all do it, especially if your kids are in a school where they have a phone on them. You can text them during the day. Make that stop. Work with other parents to make that stop.
I want to thank you both for your leadership in this space, but especially as a parent as well, to giving a voice and a solution to a problem that we're all grappling with. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.